as a community at BYU. So if we could start, Bob, 2 minutes each. Bob, then did I say, yeah, Jim, then Ross, and then Richard.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I applaud the opportunity to be more communal about the discussions. That was something that I found in the book on scholarship and Christian faith by the Jacobsens. That Christian scholars actually do have an obligation to be communal in nature and not so compartmentalized, which I think is a great limitation and obviously a predisposition of the academy. But what also prompted me through the readings and also through some of the discussion yesterday was this question of what is foundational to us, both in our own university documents and in the broader prophetic statements. I came across a few quotes, and I told Alan, just in the concern for time, I might just read those. "We should be a people of profound learning pertaining to the things of the world," said Brigham Young, "but without being tainted by pernicious atheistic influences." Consistent with the mission and aims of a BYU education, Lorenzo Snow said, "We ought to understand that we have espoused a system of religion that is calculated in its nature to increase within us wisdom and knowledge. The whole idea of Mormonism is improvement, mentally, physically, morally, and spiritually. No halfway education suffices for the Latter-day Saint." In our BYU University policy on rank and status, we read, "The purpose of scholarship and creative work at its highest level is to serve God and humanity. According to the document, scholarship should contribute to the university's mission and should achieve one of the following objectives. It should improve the education of the minds and the spirits of students, contribute to the expansion of truth throughout the world, facilitate the solution of pressing world problems, or enhance the quality of people's lives." German philosopher Goethe said, "We are shaped and fashioned by the things we love. Scholars are fashioned by the things they love." In the Book of Mormon, we read how Nephi lamented over those who will not search knowledge nor understand great knowledge. We are told that scholarly work brings faculty to the frontiers of their disciplines. Scholarship is an important and indeed necessary part of the purpose of Brigham Young University. The opportunity to join in the quest for new knowledge and understanding, to contribute to the process of artistic performance, expression, or creation, and to improve the quality of life should be reason enough for participation, especially when the possibility exists to integrate religious values with secular learning. It has been said that if Brigham Young University did only that which other universities do, and in the same way, there would be little reason for the church to operate it. Elder Neil A. Maxwell said, "We need not be fearful of facts. Nothing lasting will come out of the territory of truth, or appear suddenly on the frontier of fact that cannot be incorporated with the gospel of Jesus Christ. True believers, as Alma used the term, are also true scholars." Elder Maxwell continued, "BYU is now in a position to turn its face outward to the world without having to explain itself too self-consciously. The LDS scholar has his citizenship in the kingdom, but he carries his passport into the professional world, not the other way around." And I looked at some other policy summaries from 1994, which I won't take the time to go into now, but they really do encourage us in a very thoughtful way to look at ways that we can integrate both the rigor of our scholarship with the rigor of a religious dimension. Thanks.
Jim?
Yesterday, one of the things that struck me particularly was the idea that there's some correlation between the metaphysical ideas that a particular religion has and the way in which it approaches scholarship. And I was thinking about that as we talked at our table, and we had an interesting result that at our table we thought, well, of the four choices, the Catholic and the Anabaptist seemed to describe Mormons best, and we were quite convinced that the Calvinists didn't at all, only to have Richard Williams stand up and go for Calvinism. So it really, I don't know what that means. In fact, I'm not sure how much connection there is between, metaphysical ideas about the nature of reality or something on the one hand, and then everyday practices on the other. But I really have been thinking about that since then, and wondering whether there are things about Latter-day Saint belief that make us think about teaching and learning and scholarship differently than we would if we were of another religious mindset. I mean, for example, it seems to me that the fact that ultimately Latter-day Saints are materialists, that means that we don't think about transcendence in the same way that other religions do. In fact, what they would call transcendence, we think of as just, there's no such thing. We don't. Generally, I think we deny the kind of transcendence, this otherworldly, metaphysical God. We have a God who is in time and space, who is embodied, who works with us. And so I wonder what kinds of effects those ideas have on the ways we go about doing things. Do they have too little effect? Do they have, should they have more effect? Do they have any effect? And for me, it just is a question more than it is an insight. I really do wonder how much connection there is between our religious ideas and the ways we think about learning.
Thank you. Awesome.
The thing that struck me the most, thinking about the readings, and as we listened to them yesterday, was their feeling that students wanted meaning. And as I saw that in the reading, my first thought was, well, that doesn't apply to us. Our students come with a sense of meaning in their lives. When I thought about it some more, I realized that these students, especially the freshmen when they first get here, have had seminary teachers who didn't think much of science, and science teachers who didn't think much of religion. And now they think, oh, finally, I'm at BYU. We're going to join those two. And as I've thought about the way I've taught my classes, I don't think I've done very much of that. When I was hired here, I was interviewed by Elder Brewerton, and he read me J. Reuben Clark's statement about how the gospel of Jesus Christ should be involved in our teaching and the charge of Brigham Young to Carl G. Mazer. And I honestly said to him, I appreciate that, but I don't know how I would do that in a physics class. And he smiled for a minute and thought, and he said, well, if you stand in front of your students and they know that you're a scientist and they also know that you're a faithful member of the church, that helps. And I said, okay, I can do that. But I'm not sure I have, actually. When I stand up in front of my students, I'm not sure they know who I am, know anything about the faith side of my life. And so I'm going to try to do a better job of that, maybe have a little devotional every other class period and open it up for questions and respond to them and try to give them a sense of what it's like to both be a scientist and to be a faithful member of the church. Do a better job of that than I have in the past.
Thank you.
I need to pick up, I think, on a question that Jim raised, because it's been a central question for me, and that was the thing that was most impressed upon me yesterday. I think that all of the Jacobsens' approaches to scholarship and learning apply to us. All four of them do. But I am convinced that owing to some very important but sometimes subtle differences in our religious knowledge and convictions, they don't apply in exactly the same way. That is, we will be doing something slightly different from what any other religious group would be doing under those same circumstances. And I think that the reason for that is closely related to why it is that we do not profess to have, and thankfully do not have, a theology, but we have a cosmology. We have a set of things we take to be true, and they are true because they just happen to be the case. That is, that God has a body as tangible as man's is not the result of careful philosophical deliberation. It is the case or it's not. And most of our grounding truths, I believe, at the end of the day will be shown to be of that sort. So, having had to stand up and declare myself a Calvinist and an integrationist, there is a subtle difference between my motivation, I hope, and my methods for doing that, not to bring an orthodoxy of belief. As a people and as a church, we have allowed people to believe almost what they want. If you think of the Temple Recommend interviews, they're not phrased in terms of what do you believe, but do you have a testimony and what do you do? But I think there are some things that we can believe and teach that make it more difficult for people to understand, to repent, to understand and keep their covenants, and to have an explanation for why. And we need to explore those things. And if there are some knowledge, some bits of knowledge, learning theories that make that more difficult, then I take it upon myself to try to examine that and see if that knowledge is worth having. I mentioned at our table yesterday that we are taught that by the time Joseph Smith came on the scene, all the contemporary religions were wrong together. And we learn from Elder Talmage and others that one of the reasons they went wrong was that they had incorporated Western philosophy, Greek philosophy, in one way or another. And so it stretches my credulity a bit to believe that those ideas were, the result of those ideas was that all the religions went wrong, but virtually all of the scholarly disciplines weren't harmed by them in some way. So I've taken it upon myself just to be cautious, to be as skeptical in my own scholarly work as I am in my religious beliefs. Just what are the implications of this? What is the foundation? Does it make connection with what we know to be the case? And in my own scholarly work, I've tried to subject those kinds of ideas to the most rigorous analysis that I could. But I don't use my religion to attack the ideas in order to achieve some sort of orthodoxy. My conviction is if they're really wrong, if they don't jibe with that state of affairs we know to be true, then they're wrong of their own merit and can be shown to be intellectually inadequate as well. So that's been what's animated my career, and I guess that's a species of integrationism, but I think of a very different sort. And most of what we do, I think Jim's right about this, while it may not appear radically different on the surface, underneath, I think whatever we do will be very different.
Thank you. We're doing pretty well. We didn't do 2 minutes each, but some thoughtful responses. Let's get some from you. I'm not looking for speeches, but key ideas or questions, disagreements. What did you pull out of yesterday or the readings, if you've done those and weren't here? Please.
I think it occurred that all the other religious traditions we heard about have allowed science and scholarship to influence religious beliefs as much as religion influences scholarship. And I feel as Mormonism or LDS does not do that yet. I wonder, can we get to that point? Is that even desirable? Or are we stopping to be what we are if we get to the point where we say we allow science to change theological ideas and doctrine?
Interesting. Okay, should the influence be
Question I have.
neutral?
Can I jump in a second?
I would repeat what people say, okay?
Yeah. I think what you're saying is, in the Jacobsens terms, they were talking about faith influencing learning, and you're saying, but they were also talking about learning or science influencing faith. Should we do that in our setting? What would that be? Richard doesn't believe we have a theology. By the way, neither does Jim. He didn't come out and say that, but I think I've heard him say that before, in terms of a formal framework or system of belief. And so in some ways that might influence, but at least there's an interesting question there. Would it influence our doctrine?
Fire people if they assert certain things that contradict us. So that's what I want.
So how should that relationship be? Let's keep going. I wanted
Can
to
I
see if
jump
there...
in a minute here? Because I know just a little bit about this. There is one case I know of where science has influenced the way